like your poster. You still want to paint like that?
Do you paint?
I used to draw when I was a kid. Mainly people, teachers, and other kids in my class. Girls I liked. Sometimes cats. I just always focused on getting their faces just right. That's why I moved back to the city. I wanted to get into graphic design. I was in classes when I met Emily.
How'd that happen?
I worked at a bar downtown to pay for classes. She kept coming in after work and ordering the most complicated drinks. Things I had no idea how to make. Like a dark and smoky was the name of one. Anyways, one night she came in and just jumped over the bar, offered to teach me. She stayed until we closed, and then she asked me out.
And you went.
I didn't know who she was or what she did. She was just this girl in a suit who watched me while I made drinks. She made me nervous. She stared at me like I was a painting. Her family had a sailboat. She took me out on it. We sailed to the Bahamas for a week. And then we went to Aspen. She taught me how to ski. Guess you could say she really swept me off my feet. She proposed to me in Maui that winter, and then we were married in spring.
How old were you?
That was 5 years ago, so I was 27. It's funny, time just moves so fast, and then it just stops. And then it doesn't move. It's like, how does that happen?
You said that you were depressed before.
It's different this time. I can't get it off me. It's like a giant thumb is just pushing down on me.
We've done some studies on depression, and here's what we've learned. There are some people who benefit from talking about their thoughts and feelings, sort of healing their wounds in their psyche, maybe working through the pain of the past can, in fact, help you to move on, resolve it. You know, the way that we think can actually change our brain chemistry.
I told all the stories about my past last time, and I don't feel any better. Maybe my brain just wants me to be sad.
Well, other people benefit from medications that act directly on the brain. But you know, the people who do best are the ones who do both, talking and medication. That's what I do here.
So you want me to be on drugs?
We call it medication. But yes, I think it might help you. Have you thought about hurting yourself again?
No, I wouldn't do that to Emily.
You said that you felt this way before. Did you see someone that time?
In Connecticut, in Greenwich, Erica's exhibit. Then I moved back to the city when they took the house away.
Do you mind if I call Dr. Zibbert about your history?
If you think it'll help, I want to get better. These aren't helping me. They just upset my stomach.
Sometimes that can happen. But, you know, I think I'm going to try something else on you instead.
thank you for being here on the One Scene Podcast, Ep.2. Happy to experience that with you, and can't thank you enough for being here.
Same here. Thank you for asking. And
Sure.
number 2, I love that.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I'm putting it on the ground floor.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to start with, because I love hearing every different actor's like journey, is how did you get into acting? Like, explain that to us. Help me understand what got Enya Flack into acting.
Sometimes I'm embarrassed to tell this story because it's one of those stories that you go, okay, yeah, sure, that really happened. I started out with the idea that I was going to go into broadcasting, actually. Okay. I went to college, studied journalism, but I had not a minor, but I guess a double major in radio, TV, film. Mm-hmm. So I knew and learned a lot about being behind the camera. After I graduated from college, well, I was engaged when I got into college, and we ended up breaking up. Yeah. Broke my heart. So I decided to move west just because I just wanted to get away. Sure. I moved to San Francisco because I had been there one time for 2 weeks and liked it. Mm. That was literally all it took for me. Moved to San Francisco, got a job doing a little bit of production, but mainly I was teaching at a modeling school. Just trying to make ends meet, barely doing that. But what were you teaching? I was teaching, I was teaching male modeling classes. I was teaching guys to walk up and down a runway, but they also let me teach some commercial acting classes. I had taken one acting class. One. So you're an authority on semester. Right. One semester. Yeah. So yeah, fully qualified to do this. Yeah. But anyway, cut to this. So admittedly, this is one of those schools that was a bit of a scam. Mm-hmm. They were trying to get new potential clients in, students in, and so a manager from LA came up to scout talent. Mm-hmm. Now he was a legitimate manager, but the idea was that he would, for most of the people that came through to meet with him, he would say, I think you have potential, but you could use some training. Mm-hmm. And that's where the director of the school came in. Sure. However, at the end of his session with us, he actually came to my office because as a teacher we were not allowed to speak with him. But he came to my office and sort of said, you have a really good look, great look. I think that do you act? And I said, well, not really. Yeah. Anyway, he had me read some sides with him, and decided that he felt as though he could represent me, and asked me if I'd move to LA. Wow. I had been in San Francisco not even 6 months, and I said, no, I don't want to move to LA. I had been there one time and didn't particularly like it. Anyway, he said, well, if I could get you an audition, would you come down? And I said, well, if it's within, if it's on my day off, which is a Friday. Yeah. He got me an audition within 2 weeks. Okay. And amazingly, I mean, this was just a little co-star thing for a sitcom that was on at that time. Yeah. I read for it and somehow beat out all of the other actors who were going for that part. Yeah. And I was, Taft-Hartley'd into the union. Yeah. So, and I guess I didn't know enough to be nervous or scared. It was just kind of, okay, let's try this. Yeah, I love it. And that is literally how I got into acting. It just worked for me, and at that time of my life, I was willing to try anything. I moved from San Francisco and got an agent, and that was it. Awesome. That was it. Yeah, I love it. That's kind of ridiculous. That's a beautiful path. But what sitcom was it? It was called Out All Night. Okay. It starred Vivica Fox, Patti LaBelle, Morris Chestnut, Dwayne Williams, I think it is, and it's a few others. But it was a short-lived sitcom. But at that time, there were a lot of sitcoms. Yeah, this was still in the 90s. It was still kind of sitcom era. Yep, that was it. The pilot week was still kind of a big thing. It was a real thing. Yeah. When people say I'm preparing for pilot season now, I'm like, I feel like it's constantly pilot season. It really is. Yeah. So cool. It's very distinct. Awesome. Yeah. So you got that role. Did that? You had moved out to LA at that point? Mm-hmm. I moved to LA. was about a couple months after I got that first role, and
yeah.
I got a job at Warner Brothers as a production secretary, just because I felt I needed
Something.
a real job.
Yeah, smart.
And what was great about that was, as the secretary, I got to know the casting people, because I was processing all the contracts for the actors who were guests on the shows that I was attached to.
Yeah.
Got to know the casting people, and so they started, and they knew that I wanted to act, or was trying to act, and they would call me, just, hey, John Stamos needs some backup singers, an actor to play a backup singer in the band on Full House.
Yeah.
Do you want to audition?
Yeah.
So they weren't going through my agent. They were just calling me to audition, which
that's
was
awesome.
great.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it just worked out really well for me.
Awesome. So how long did you stay in that scene in LA, and how long was that phase of life?
In LA?
Yeah.
I was there for almost 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah. It just, I was very fortunate. When I first moved to LA, I decided, okay, I'm going to give this 3 years. See what happens.
It's a dangerous statement. I've done that. Yeah.
And it's, and it just, I think when you put yourself in that position, it's fate or whatever, just, it sort of pushes you in a different way.
Yeah.
Anyway, toward the end of the third year, I booked my first series.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which was?
It was Malcolm and Eddie.
Okay.
Which was on the UPN network. And I was a series regular.
That's cool.
So that was kind of great, and it was nice to make an actual living just acting
doing it.
at that time.
How long did that run?
I think the show actually ran for maybe 5 years. I was only on season 1.
Okay.
They cut my character after the first season. I could sort of see it going away. We had a little thing. Malcolm and I just. He saw his character differently than it was originally written. So I saw I was his love interest, and I
saw that arc going.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fun.
But still, it was great. That was a great credit
for
my resume, and it just sort of made booking other things a lot easier. After that.
Sure. I know eventually you've stepped from like TV stuff into like film. What was your first film credit? Did you have a desire to be okay, I've done the TV stuff, but I really want to be in a film? And did it feel different at the time? Film actors were different from television actors?
It did. You know what though? I learned that I actually prefer television.
Yeah.
Film is wonderful, and from a creative side, being behind the camera.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I love it. But it's different. I'm a Capricorn. I don't know if that makes any difference.
My wife would know. I wouldn't. But
we're very tend to be more methodical or what's the word? It's about being stable.
Okay.
Stability. So the great thing about television was, at 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, whatever it might be, but it's a weekly.
It's a day job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Film, of course, is wonderful, and it's so creative. In some ways, you can be so much more creative. But it's short lived. Whether it's a 3-week shoot or a 3-month or what have you shoot. It's so. Yeah. But I did enjoy film, and my first film was The Nutty Professor too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on your IMDb, and I was going to ask I've seen it. I just can't remember what was your role in it.
You wouldn't, because I was in the. I guess it was one of the first scenes. It was a wedding scene, and I was Janet Jackson's maid of honor.
Okay.
And I had a whopping 2 lines, I guess, which both got cut.
Oh no.
So I was I ended up being a glorified extra. However, if you look at the credits, I am listed, I think, 6th from the top.
There you go.
So residuals to this day.
Really? Wow.
They're small, but
hey, it works.
But
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I did. There was a Kate Beckinsale film that came through Greensboro, and they were doing reshoots, and they had me come in to be I guess a featured extra is what it would be. And it's a modern day film, but they had me walking around in a Civil War outfit all day.
Oh.
I didn't get a script. No one handed me anything, and so we shot like a little mini scene where I'm like jumping out of a mirror, like scaring someone, or I guess I was a ghost. But I was the only guy on set all day walking around as a Civil War character, and I kept getting asked, even from Kate, she was like, "Why are you dressed as a Civil War guy?" And I'm like, if you don't know, I'm a little concerned as well. But I don't think I even got a credit. I don't, and they cut that scene, so I know what it feels like to feel like you want to go see that movie when it's, and then it comes out and it's like, oh, I cut my scene.
Well, if you've ever seen Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, one of the scenes is in a barber shop, and Cuba Gooding, who's an Oscar winner, is sitting in the barber chair.
Just sitting.
He doesn't say anything. But I think the story is he had lines also.
And they just got
so I feel, oh my God, if it's okay for Cuba Gooding, I guess it's okay for me.
Everyone's got to pay their dues.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So you're in LA, did it for 20 years, kind of got a little bit of a taste of all the different sides of things. Did you do, because you've got a good mind and a good way about you as far as like production and producing. Did you do any of that while you were out there?
I didn't do a lot out there. I did more of that before I left. I went to school in Washington, D.C. And so I did more of that there a little bit. What I did get to do sort of along the line is I decided to dip my toe back into broadcasting to some degree. I did a lot of entertainment reporting.
Okay.
So I worked for E! News Live. I worked for Extra, a couple of other smaller shows, but in that I got to do more producing.
Yeah, so. That's cool. That's fun. Yeah. You do anything like that now, or?
Not so much right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about doing it again, but you know, one show that I did was called what's the name of the what's it called? Gosh, I've lost my mind. National Enquirer TV.
Okay.
National Enquirer TV was the first one of those entertainment shows that I did, and of course that was sort of the nature of the show. But I felt a little snakish. Basically, there was one story I did on an actor that I knew, and I had been to his home and met his family, and then unfortunately later on, a few years later, when I was working on the show, he was going through a divorce, and it was all about that, you know, just you know, that. So I thought,
no, I don't want to do
no, that's not what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so you're in LA. What prompted the move out of LA?
I just sort of felt like it had run its course. You know, it's wonderful when you get to do the job, when you get to practice your craft, but the jumping through the hoops. I mean, and that's true, I guess, just about anywhere you go. Yeah. But
it is different out in LA, though.
It changed a lot. I'll tell you when it started to change was during the writer's strike. In the 2000s, I guess it was the first writer's strike. Yeah. Because that was sort of the dawn of reality television.
Sure.
And the auditions started to slow down a bit, and then I would see reality TV stars in the waiting room, in the casting offices, and it was just sort of, sorry to anyone who doesn't agree with me on this, but it was a bit of a slap in the face, because, you know, while I did not specifically study to be an actor, I did not go to drama school. When I got into LA, I did take classes and workshops and all sorts, so I did study the craft. So it is, you know, it was a little disheartening to see people booking jobs that appeared to be stunt casting, as they say. Yeah. And there was more and more of that. Yeah. A lot more non-union stuff, which, you know, it sort of undercut our salaries a little bit, what have you. Anyway, and like I said, I've been very fortunate. I've been a series regular several times. I just felt like, all right, it's just time to move on. Yeah. And I missed North Carolina. Yeah. So
that's where you're originally from, is North Carolina. Yeah.
From Charlotte.
Yeah, that's good. And you're in Charlotte now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you still have your agent in LA, and you're with JTA as well here in Charlotte, or is it just JTA?
No, I still have an agent in
Okay.
Momentum Talent.
Yeah.
And you know, they're so, I love them so much. I've been with them for 12 years now,
Wow.
I guess, something like that. And yeah, they continue to represent me on the West Coast.
On the West Coast. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. How have you seen it change? I know there was a big shift on the East Coast, early, maybe mid 2000s, when productions picked up really big in Atlanta. What was that shift like for you? Was that around the time you kind of got back here, or were you?
No, I didn't get back until 20. When did I get back? Well, I got back in 2015, 2016.
Okay.
2016.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed the
initial launch.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I kind of thought when I moved back here, well, maybe I'll get to audition for a commercial or two here and there, whatnot. I thought that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
I had heard about the big uptick in productions here in North Carolina, but I also knew that the incentives, I guess, are no longer in place than they were before. So again, I didn't expect to get to do much.
Right.
I've been extremely surprised.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. About how much
When I got into acting, it was almost as if the moment I got an agent, they shut down productions in Wilmington. Like the politics got in the way, and the incentives went away.
Yeah.
And for some reason, they thought they wouldn't just up and move to a different state, and that's exactly what they did. They said, "All right, bye North Carolina.
Yeah.
Hey Georgia, we're going to be best friends." And then they shot like every Marvel film and tons. I think it's a Black Hall Studio or whatever's down there.
That's it.
And yeah, so, which wasn't a big deal. I was still getting auditions and stuff down there, but convenience-wise, it's like it would have been nice to have just been running to Wilmington.
Yeah.
They still have huge production studios in Wilmington. I think the biggest pool, like for filming in like a tub, is in Wilmington. Like across the nation, the biggest one is in Wilmington.
Really?
Yeah. I watch films and I see them doing like scenes where they're in boats and stuff, and I'm like, I bet they filmed that in Wilmington. If I was to look at the credits or look, I bet they filmed that in the studio. I know all the Dawson's Creek like water scene and stuff were filmed there, but like any film with any water, I'm like, they got to be filming it. Except for Avatar, I'm sure they did that in LA.
I wish I had known about that. I got to do a TV show in Wilmington. The first time I had ever gotten to work in Wilmington was about a year and a half ago or so. Okay. It was a show called Our Kind of People that was being shot at the Screen Gems studio in Wilmington. It was one episode that I was supposed to be there for 3 days, and because of all the issues with COVID and all this stuff, I ended up being there 3 weeks. Darn.
Oh no.
Which was kind of great. But I wish I had known about that tub. That would have been kind of fun.
I'd like to see it. It's kind of seems cool. So so you mentioned the actors' strike. Currently there's another, well, you mentioned the writer's strike. There's a writer's strike happening now. And there's now a SAG actors' strike happening. What are your thoughts on that? What is your opinion on some of there's a list, almost 10 or 15 points long as to why they're striking, but some of the main ones, what are your thoughts on some of the bigger, pillars that they're kind of, we will die on this hill kind of thing?
Well, I guess one of the great things, interesting things about being in the business as long as I have is, I have seen what they're talking about with regard to how salaries have eroded. I mean, the show that I was telling you about, my first part, as I think I said, it was 2 lines, literally 2 lines.
Yeah.
I worked 2 hours. I think I had a couple day guarantee, but so for all intents and purposes, 2 lines, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I remember I made $1,800. Wow. And that was part of why I ended up moving to LA. I thought, wow, I don't make this in a month
if I can make
teaching in San Francisco.
Right.
But $1,800. Now, no.
You get that bare minimum SAG rate if you're lucky.
Yeah. And it's and it's especially frustrating, having been in the business for so long. It's SAG, it's SAG basic rate, whatever. Not to mention that there are, even we have ultra low budget things and all that sort of stuff. But it hasn't kept up with inflation. There's no way that most actors can do this for a living.
Right.
For what?
Do you think so? When I studied acting at Actors Group in Winston. I got an agent and I booked a couple TV things and whatever. And at some point, I just made the decision. I said, okay, for my own personal sake and for the sake of really the acting industry, I won't work for free anymore. I won't do it. And I've stuck to that, and I've turned down things, and I've said no to a lot of things that come through just on principle, because I'm trying to hold that standard of, this is a craft, this is an art, and we're artists, and we should be treated, and paid for our talents. And I think, unfortunately, it is an industry where, I think the people at the top are taking advantage of a certain thing, but also the people at the bottom are so hungry and they're so desperate that they're willing to say, I'll take advantage of me, because they're hoping that if they can just get in front of the right person and meet the right, team, that it's going to be this launching pad. And I think it undercuts the whole industry. So it's kind of a top and bottom issue for me, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Although background work is not necessarily considered real work in some areas. As I told you, I didn't exactly start off as a background artist, but during those lean times when those speaking roles were not coming in, I did sign up. Yeah. And so I did do a little bit of background work. Yeah. And but the standards are held very high for background artists out in Los Angeles. Sure. I know the same is true in New York for my friends who work in New York. And but you're right. I get the breakdowns every day. And just the other day, I saw this was a part in, I think it was a commercial in Florida. They're paying $11 an hour. Oh wow! $11 an hour for, I think it's an 8-hour day. No but travel. I guess $11 an hour is the minimum wage, and it said, I think it said Florida minimum wage. Yeah. Really? Wow. So I could work at McDonald's and make more. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. As opposed to doing something that I've been trained to do. Sometimes I work. Right. Yeah. Okay. And there's someone that's going to do it because they think it's that step that's going to get. And I think that's part of the problem is they know that I agree. They know that they can get away with it in some regards. You might can get away with it, but I think at the end of the day, on some level, you're getting what you pay for. Yeah. But I hate to say, this seems to be happening a lot, though. My mother was a teacher for 35 years. Yeah. But now, as a matter of, I've got a scholarship right now that I'm doing in my mom's name for people who want to be teachers, because people don't want to teach anymore because they can't afford to. Yep. And so it's just these careers that we train for, we expect to be able to make a living at. Yeah. They've just all been devalued. Yep. And it's just not fair. Yeah. So that's a big sticking mirror. But also the whole AI issue. Sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's crazy. That is scary to me. I was reading that some of the contracts that they're offering to background actors is that they'll scan them in, and then they own the rights to their scan for a lifetime. And that there are some background actors that are agreeing to that because, again, I think they think, one, they need the money then, that, okay, I'll take that, whatever they're willing to pay for that. Yeah. And then, hopefully this gets me in front of someone at some point, and that's wild. Yeah. That's wild. I think about people like some of the top tier actors who have worked on like Marvel films, or I think about all of the scans that they did for Brad Pitt for Benjamin Button. I mean, they've got his whole likeness on some digital hard drive somewhere that they could pull up at any point, and I guess they own the rights to it. Yeah. Does that mean that they can use Brad's image? What does that look like, or they just have to pay Brad? It's a wild, it's a new frontier. It really is.
And so I think those that are blazing it are, they're gonna run some people down while they do it. And yeah, I think it's good that SAG is trying to rein them in some ways. You can rein in the studios, I think, as far as like AI and stuff, but I don't think you're gonna be able to rein in, every average Joe Blow who can run it at home and do a deep fake or recreate a performance of Brad Pitt's from his computer, from his Mac. There's not much you can do about that. But as far as the studios, I think hopefully they can be reined in.
I hope so. I mean, I really hope so. I think I read the other day that which studio it was, that there's a studio who they recently put out a job listing or what have you, we'll say, for an AI.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Technician. And the salary would equal, I think it would pay for, I think it was like 10 SAG actors health insurance.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But the thing about AI is, even though it's interesting and kind of cool and fun for us right now, they might be able to duplicate Brad Pitt's image and all that. But you have to stop and think: why do people go to movies? Why do people watch TV? What have you? And so often, at least for me, like for example, if I see that Meryl Streep is going to be in a movie, I'll go to see that movie even if I don't know anything about it, just because it's Meryl Streep, because I love her. I think she's brilliant. And you might be able to duplicate her image, but you can't duplicate her essence. What she gives to a role is, you can't duplicate that. And I would hope that audiences would feel that way. See that.
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, you'll never have an AI do a performance like a Daniel Day-Lewis. It's impossible. The subtleties, the nuance, the amount of depth that he can bring into a character, the life that he can breathe into a character, you'll never get that with AI. I think for us, it's I think just self-preservation of for the lower man, the people who aren't getting roles where the role needs to have life breathed into it. Sometimes you're just given a role where you just need to be a waiter, or you just need to, come in and do your one scene and head out. And I think I could see them cutting corners eventually in some of those aspects. Hopefully not. But I think it's a crazy frontier. And I watched there's a documentary called Listen to Me, Marlon. It's a documentary about Marlon Brando. And they have all these audio recordings of him that he recorded later in his life that he would listen to himself. And he's talking to himself. Maybe he was losing his mind a little bit. Maybe he was going off the deep end. I don't know. But so he would say, "Listen to me, Marlon," and he would talk to himself. And sometimes it was him just consoling himself about petty things like, "Hey, Marlon, you don't need to eat that many sugar cakes today because you ate this many yesterday." It's just weird. He's a weirdo guy. He's kind of, but that's where most artists are. They kind of,
you have to be. Sure.
Especially if you're going to be great like that. But he had met with, at the time, a digital artist, not even a 3D artist, just a digital artist. Marlon did, and he allowed the artist to scan his face. Before we had CGI, like really, what we have now, before we had digital scans of any actor's faces, he thought, "Hey, I think this is where things are going, and I want my likeness scanned so that I can continue to perform even after I'm gone." It's crazy. And so they took those scans, and when they made the documentary, they took the audio of him talking to himself, and they 3D rendered the scans into a 3D render of his face. And then they had an actor come in and perform. They face mapped it to his face, and they had an actor perform it. And so when you're watching this documentary, you see this image, and I'll try to find an image. I'll put it up while I'll talk about it. But you see this image of Marlon Brando where basically he's there. He's been dead for however long, 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. But he's still, it's him like when he was recording himself doing a Macbeth quote. And so you get to see Marlon Brando give this other performance that he never actually gave through all this technology. And it's amazing
Yeah.
It's also kind of scary at the same time.
It is scary. It is scary.
I think about Harrison Ford. I mean, they aged him back 20 or 30 years for this Indiana Jones film, which unfortunately looked like a terrible film to begin with. I hate to say it, but sorry. But they aged him backwards. It's like, okay, at what point is he too old to be aged back to be playing an action hero? At what point our audience is going to get tired of that? I think maybe we've reached that point, but who knows?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it is interesting, especially if you're a fan of
Harrison
Ford or whomever. But it becomes a little bit I don't know, distasteful, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends. I guess depends on how far you go with it, and are people being compensated, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, it's a crazy industry. Who knows? By the time I edit this and get it out there, the strike might be over, and we're just talking about something that that would be great. I really don't get a whole lot of auditions these days. When I get them, they're good reads. I really enjoyed JTA. They've been a great agent for me. But for me, even to notice, like, wow, it's dead out there right now.
It's very dead.
And I think about like, okay, if the actors aren't getting auditions, and what about like how long can the makeup artists and the gaffers and the DPs, like how long can they go? How long?
Yeah, exactly.
And they've got
craft service people.
Yeah, okay, all of it, the whole industry. Even I know, like woodworkers. I know it's crazy, but even woodworkers who build. It's all encompassing.
And in LA, I'm sure you know that's basically what everybody does.
Everyone is
somehow tied to the industry.
I think it is a good, healthy balance for actors to realize, though. Is a good thing for them to understand. Is I don't know many actors that I know personally on my level that are just making it with acting. You kind of need another gig. You kind of need to have that side hustle or that main hustle so that acting can be the fun thing when it comes along. Like you mentioned, you probably booked that first audition kind of because you didn't know any better, and kind of because you weren't nervous because you didn't care less, but if it didn't work out, it wasn't going to change your life. It wasn't, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think there's something to that. I think when you walk into an audition and you haven't worked in forever and you don't have a second job, I think they can feel that desperation.
Oh,
I think the casting people can see this guy really wants this role, and it bleeds through, and it makes for a terrible performance. So hopefully this is a wake up call for some actors. It's like, hey, don't put yourself in that situation. Have a backup plan.
I think we all have to be like entrepreneurs in one way or another for sure. I've started so many businesses, side businesses and whatnot, but going back to what we were saying about background work, that's an LA thing too.
Yeah.
I knew actors who had done a few background jobs, and they eventually that's all they did.
Yeah.
Because they were making good money at it, because they were SAG.
Yeah.
And
that's the other end.
I know somebody who was while he would sit on set, he was always on his computer. He ended up writing a novel, which ended up being a bestseller.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah, use it to your advantage. Yeah, if they're going to pay you to sit around.
Yeah, exactly. So but you always you have to have something else.
I don't think anyone working in a creative field can put all their eggs in one basket.
No.
That's partially why I'm doing the podcast. Is I want to act, whether Hollywood hires me or whether I have the time to go shoot my own film. Which, hate to break it to you, Hollywood, we have the technology, we can do it ourselves now.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do it when I can, where I can, and have fun with it. But it's not going to be something where I'm begging for change on the street to be able to do. As much as I love it. So.
Good. You're on the right track.
That's the way. I wish I could get everyone on board with that.
Yeah.
I think it fights that bottom where the top is taking advantage of that desperation.
Right. So true.
So.
Yeah, I did, one of my little side hustles was, I used to do trade shows on the side, and it's actually really good work, at least at the time. I would also do trade show presenting, and would end up making more money doing that than, you know, most acting jobs. But then one of my clients said, you know, you ought to start your own, you should just book people, you know, lots of people. And so I do event staffing to this day for trade shows and conventions and whatnot. You know, you just have to let yourself think outside of the box. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 9-to-5 job that you do, it's just something that allows you, you know, hopefully do something that you enjoy, but also leaves you time to audition when the auditions come around again. Yeah.
Something that leaves that flexibility. I think that's the hardest struggle to find, especially if you're middle-aged guy, you know, even younger middle-aged guy like me with a family and stuff. It's like, I'm gonna provide for them first, and wherever that flexible time comes out, you know, I'll find time for that audition, but sometimes I won't, and that's okay. You know, that's life.
Well, when we see it, so many people see people on TV and they think, oh, you know, overnight success. There's really, that's rare. That's so rare. I mean, I think what people who are not in the industry don't know or don't fail to think about is that, you know, when somebody's up there and they won that Emmy or that Oscar or whatnot, that didn't just happen. That's a lot of blood, sweat, tears, mostly a lot of tears probably, you know, and a lot of time that they've put into what it takes to be successful in this industry. So
well, that, and then also
a lot of persistence.
there's probably thousands of the people with the same exact dedication and storyline that just didn't hit, you know, and they're just
luck.
There's
right
a lot
agent,
of it.
right time, right, you know, everything.
So, there was I wanted, and I probably will eventually if I ever create a space for this, but I was going to call it the No Actor Podcast, No Actors Allowed, because I don't want it to be about the actors and their vanity and whatever. I want you to come and just be a person. But there was in LA when people, like, I think it was maybe in the 50s or whatever, they started like hearing about, you know, you can go to LA and become a movie star, and so they had this flood of young people just move into LA, and on like hotels they had signs that said no cats, no dogs, and no actors allowed. Because actors wouldn't pay their rent, and so I wanted to have a sign that said the same thing here in the middle of the shot. Maybe one day. But
I love it.
Yeah, it's great. So, well, cool. Well, I've had a blast. Thank you for meeting me out here and doing this. I'm sure we could go on and on, but I'm sure I'll have you on at some point. You know what? Before we wrap up, I would like to talk about the scene. The whole point of this is to talk about the scene, and then I always forget to. So when we were trying to find a scene, you had mentioned wanting to find a scene that had, you know, like a therapist, like you hadn't really gotten to play a therapist or whatever. So I actually read like 5 or 6 like different scripts of films about therapists, and there's the film Side Effects, and that's what we pulled the scene from. Have you seen that movie?
I have.
Yeah. So we changed it a little bit. We flipped the roles. We flipped the genders a little bit, which is a fun dynamic to play on. What about that scene kind of was like, when I sent it to you, was like, hey, let's do that one?
Well, a couple of things. You know, it's interesting when my little career started. I mean, I got to read a lot of love interests, a lot of girlfriends, whatnot, and you know, the fluffy things. And yeah, that's a great way to add to your resume. But that's one of the beautiful things about aging, I guess, is the more experience you have, the more you can pull from as an actor. And for me with this scene, so I was married before, and the guy that I was married to he's since passed away, but he suffered from depression. And I remember he told me about it before we got married, and he said he'd been diagnosed, so on and so forth. And I was like, okay, well, we'll work through it. I really had no concept. It's just something that had not, you know,
hit your world.
Got into my world at any point. And so, and there's a commercial. It's for a pharmaceutical company, but it says, "Who does depression hurt?" And you're seeing, you know, different kids. You're seeing kids and spouses, and they show a dog waiting on it with a leash. But it's depression is such a it's such a tough disease, and it does affect everyone.
Sure.
So having that experience helped me with this scene, because it's not, if you had given me this scene 20 years ago, I would have been like, oh, okay, so you're depressed. You know, right? Maybe not quite
just
that
stop.
bad. But it's you know, that as an actor, it's having these experiences in life, and only life can, and time can, you know, can provide that to you. So yeah, so that's what was going through my head.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. For me, I think, you know, a lot of the scenes that I was getting when I first started, I feel like I always wanted to play older roles, you know. The teen drama stuff, boring. But I looked like a, you know, little kid when I started. I was 20-something years old or whatever. I still have, you know, a younger face than probably what I, you know. But so now I'm getting into that age bracket where there's a lot of stuff that I would love to touch on, and a lot of material that I can actually finally age-wise and look-wise play. And so I'm excited to get into that realm. You mentioned like aging. I'm excited to get into that realm of acting. And of course, you parallel that with, I'm finally at an age where I can actually like play the roles that I want to play. But I'm also at that age where I've got a family and wife and kids. And so it's like, I've got to be picky and choosy about where I put that time. You know, one, I want it, if I'm going to play that role, I'm going to go 110% into that role. How much can I do that if I've got a wife and kid, you know? And so it's fun to get to do that here and play around in that world without it having to cost so much time away from them, you know?
Well, during the time I was in LA, and as I told you, I was there for a while.
Yeah.
I can count on one hand, in fact, I can count on 2 fingers, the number of married couples that I know.
Yeah.
The thing about being an actor is, and I've always said this, you know, there has to be, I think, at least there's a certain level of narcissism that kind of goes along with it, because you are your own product, and you have to focus. And when you're in that kind of competition, you know, having a spouse can be really difficult. Because, you know, you have to focus in on yourself so much. So that sounds really, really bad. But it's, I think, you know, but when you do have a family, it's another level. I won't say it makes it more difficult, but it definitely. It's you know.
I think you have to have
your priorities have to shift.
Right. You've got to have your head on straight going into it. I think Steve Carell, when he finally popped off and became famous overnight, you know, he said he looks at these younger guys coming up now, and he just feels sorry for them, because he said, when I got famous, when I got like world famous, I was already sure of who I was as a person, what my priorities were with my family. Like all of my foundation was built, and I was a 40-year-old man, you know. And so the waves of people throwing love and fame at me and money and stuff, none of that is going to change who I am, you know. But you've got these young kids coming up, you know, and they get famous in their 20s, and they don't know who they are. And you see them crash under the weight of it all, because their foundation isn't there yet. They haven't had that time. And so it can be challenging. Yeah, it can be challenging for a married man to try to do it. It can be challenging for a young kid to, if they do have success, to deal with the weight of all that. You know, you are your product, you know, and so you have to really have a command of who you are.
I think the trick is you don't want to chase fame. You want to enjoy the craft. You want to, you know, just enjoy the journey and just the creative process. But don't chase fame. Because then you will for sure crash and burn, because it doesn't always come, regardless of how talented you are, or or even how much time you put into it. You know.
It's awful. I couldn't imagine. Sad. What a sad existence. Chasing fame.
But it happens.
It does happen, especially in this industry specifically. You get a lot of it. I'd see a lot of kids come into acting class, and you could tell it's like, do you want to act, or do you want to be famous? Because there's other ways to be famous that aren't this hard. Or maybe a more sure bet than this.
True.
So,
Very true.
you're picking the hardest route, man.
Let's rethink this.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I had fun shooting the scene. I enjoyed the playing a depressed person. We'll see how it plays. I'm in therapy myself as a young, married man. I recognized, we had 2 kids. I recognized in myself that I was not in a headspace that, like, I was depressed or upset or whatever. I just recognized, like, hey, like, this is a challenging season, and I'd rather get ahead of it than get behind it, And so I preemptively started going to therapy, and would encourage anyone watching or whatever, if you're already struggling or if you just feel like you want to get ahead of it, there are resources out there. So, I think take advantage of them and try to get ahead of it and stay ahead of it before it, comes down on top of you, that kind of thing, because life can be hard.
Yes, it can.
It can. Now, I think the interesting dynamic in this scene specifically, and I haven't seen the film, is I feel like the character, she's actually putting on a facade. My character, we switched the role, but I feel like my character's actually putting on a facade a little bit. I think she might be depressed or whatever, but I think she's also putting on a facade. I think she's doing it because, if I remember correctly, she is planning on killing her husband and blaming the drugs. And so there's a bit of that dynamic. I tried to undercurt that a little bit in the performance, without being, that's one of those, you don't want to be super heavy-handed with it, but you also don't want to just completely leave it out. It's not a scene where it's just a therapist and a depressed person.
Right.
There's something else happening subtextually here that at least one person is aware of. And so we'll see if that plays through. And I wasn't quite sure because I haven't seen the film and I hadn't read the whole script. That's one of those, the beauty, when you get an audition and it's just a scene, and you're like, okay,
how do we do this?
but what about all this that I don't know about? Like, I could play this scene, but if there's this thing over here that also needs to come into here that I don't know about, that's the one negative of auditioning,
Yeah, not to mention self-taped auditions.
Yeah.
You can't even ask that question.
No, it's the word. Yeah, you can't ask. Yeah, I saw a commercial audition come through, and I have a buddy who works for, or worked for CPI in their marketing department, and it was a CPI commercial, and I wanted to call and be like, all right, so what are you actually wanting in this performance? Because I see this, but I want to make sure this moment right here, I want to play it the way you want it and not either ham it up or underplay it. And it could go either way. I just want to know so I can do it the way you want it, so I have a better chance at booking this if I'm going to take the time to do it. But he's not working there anymore, so I didn't even have him to call. I know. But yeah, it's you want to ask those questions. Okay, but do you, because there's so many ways you can play something and interpret it on the page. You just kind of have to take a swing at it and
hope
yeah,
you're meshing with whatever
right.
was written.
Or hopefully they have some semblance of grace to the fact that you didn't fully have the full picture.
That's true.
Yeah, so cool. Well, Enya, thank you for joining me. Appreciate it.